In my first session with Clara, she told me this. I learned my price when I was 11 years old. My stepmother didn't serve tea to the guests. She served me. The room we called the guest room was my hell. Did my father not know? He knew. One night I ran to him, begging. I threw myself into his arms. "Daddy, save me," I said. He held me. He carried me back to that room. "Do what your stepmother says," he told me. That sentence is still in my ears, every night, for 23 years. Now I'm 34. I'm a veterinarian. From the outside you'd say, what a beautiful life, but I'm still in that room. Every day I'm standing in front of that door inside myself. When Clara finished speaking, I couldn't breathe for a moment. The afternoon light was fading through my office window, casting long shadows across the carpet. In 22 years of practice, I've heard hundreds of stories. But some stories don't leave you when you go home. They follow you into your kitchen, your bedroom, your dreams. Clara's story became one of those. A few sessions later, Clara spoke about her father. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. I had to lean forward to catch her words. When my father was dying, I went to see him. On his deathbed, he told me something. When I heard that sentence, I wished I hadn't gone. I wished I could remember him as Dad, not as a monster. Because that day I let my father didn't just know. My father took money, and with that money, my stepsisters went to university. Their diplomas were written on my body. Clara's voice didn't shake when she revealed this. That's what frightened me most. When trauma becomes this normalized, when someone can speak about being sold by their own father without tears, you understand just how deep the wound goes. The absence of emotion wasn't strength. It was survival. Her nervous system had learned long ago that feeling was dangerous. In some sessions, my patients healed as they talked. But some stories never left my mind. Today, I'm going to tell you about one of those lives. If you're listening to this story and there are things inside you that you can't hold in, share what you're feeling and where you're listening from in the comments. I read every comment. I hear every story. If you want to hear more therapy stories that I can't get out of my head, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. If this story touched your feelings, you can support me by liking. One day, I'd like to hear your story too. If you want me to share your story in my next video, you can send it to the email address in my profile. Remember, our stories heal, even if just a little, when they're shared. Clara came to me not because she wanted to. Her husband Michael had noticed something was wrong. She couldn't be touched. Not emotionally, not physically. 8 years of marriage, and she flinched every time he reached for her in the dark. He thought she didn't love him. She thought she was broken beyond repair. The truth was far more devastating than either of them could have imagined. Michael was a quiet man, a software engineer who worked from home. He'd married Clara thinking she was simply shy, reserved, private. He'd interpreted her distance as introversion, her flinching as sensitivity. For 8 years he'd slept beside a woman holding an ocean of pain inside her, and he'd had no idea. He blamed himself. He lost weight. He started therapy of his own, trying to figure out what he was doing wrong. He loved her, and he just didn't know what she was surviving every single day. What I didn't know in that first session, what Clara herself couldn't yet say, was that the guest room wasn't just a room, it was a business. Her stepmother Patricia had been a bookkeeper before she married Clara's father. She brought those skills to this new enterprise. She had a price list, different rates for different services, age-based pricing, the younger the more expensive. And, Clara learned this when she found the notebook, years later, tucked inside her father's Bible of all places. Her childhood, itemized in neat handwriting, dates in one column, initials in another, dollar amounts in the third. Her stepmother's penmanship was beautiful, elegant loops and careful spacing, the handwriting of a monster who dotted her eyes. The men who walked through that door weren't strangers from far away. They weren't drifters or criminals from the margins of society. They were the town's respectable citizens. Mr. Henderson, the teacher who graded Clara's homework during the week and praised her spelling. Mr. Kowalski, who owned the hardware store and gave her butterscotch candies on Saturdays. Father Morrison, the religious leader who spoke of morality on Sundays and led prayers for the sick and suffering. Men who shook hands at community events. Men whose children went to school with Clara, sat beside her in class, invited her to birthday parties. Men who, to this day, post family photos online. Blessed, they write, grateful for my beautiful family. God is good. Clara's family photos don't exist. She has no children. She can't. At 14, something happened in that room that took more than her innocence. Her stepmother Patricia didn't take her to a hospital. They'll ask questions, she'd said, her voice cold and practical. So Clara nearly bled to death on a kitchen table, while a woman named Janet, who wasn't a doctor but who helped girls in trouble for cash, did what she could with shaking hands. The smell of bleach and blood, the sound of her own screaming muffled by a dish towel, the bare light bulbs swinging overhead. Janet kept apologizing. "I'm sorry, honey, I'll be over soon." The infection that followed destroyed any chance of Clara ever becoming a mother. Her stepmother called it a complication, a business expense, an inconvenience. When Clara told me this, her hands moved to her stomach, just for a moment, an unconscious gesture. The body remembers what the mind tries to forget. Every cell carries the memory of what was taken. But here's what haunts me most about Clara's story. Her escape wasn't an escape at all. When she ran away at 16, a garbage bag of clothes clutched to her chest, she thought she was free. She stood at the edge of town in the grey morning light, watching the sun rise over the cornfields, and believed the worst was behind her. The streets had their own guest rooms, their own price lists, their own men who saw a young girl alone and calculated her value. A teacher found her 18 months later at a bus station. She was sitting on a bench, hollow-eyed, wearing the same clothes she'd worn for a week. "I'll save you," he promised, and he did. For a while, until he started expecting payment too. Clara was 19 before she understood that help could come without a price tag. 19 years before someone hugged her and wanted nothing in return. That someone was a woman at a shelter, grey-haired, soft-spoken, wearing a cardigan with a coffee stain on the sleeve. Clara doesn't remember her name, but she remembers the hug. She remembers the smell of lavender soap. She told me she cried for 3 hours straight. Not from sadness, from confusion. She didn't know what to do with kindness that asked for nothing. Clara sat in my office like she was waiting for something bad to happen. Her posture was perfect. Too perfect. Military straight. Shoulders locked. Hands folded precisely in her lap, knuckles white from the pressure. She'd learned to take up as little space as possible, to make herself small, to disappear into furniture so no one would notice her. I noticed her eyes first. They scanned the room systematically. The window. Could it open? The door. How many steps? The distance between her chair and the exit. Approximately 12 feet. Trauma survivors often do this. They map escape routes without even realizing it. It's not paranoia. It's programming. 23 years after leaving that house, Clara was still planning how to run. The late afternoon sun slanted through the blinds, casting bars of light across the carpet. Clara positioned herself carefully to avoid sitting in direct sunlight. Another tell. Survivors often avoid feeling exposed. They prefer shadows, corners, walls at their back. She'd chosen the chair furthest from the door, but with the clearest sight line to it. Strategic, unconscious, survival written into every choice. She was wearing professional clothing, a grey blazer over a white blouse, clothes that said, "I have my life together." But her shoes were practical, flat, easy to run in. The details always tell the real story. "Thank you for seeing me, Dr. Bennett," she began. Her voice was controlled, pleasant, the voice of someone who'd learned early that keeping others comfortable kept her safe. "I'm not sure I really need to be here. My husband insisted. I've heard this opening hundreds of times. The deflection, the attribution to someone else's concern. It's a way of testing the water without committing to getting wet. It says, 'I'm here, but I haven't decided to trust you yet.'" "What made him insist?" I inquired, keeping my voice neutral. Clara's perfect posture wavered, just slightly. A micro movement in her shoulders, a millimeter of collapse that most people would miss. "He thinks I don't love him, because I can't." She stopped. I watched her throat move as she swallowed. "Because physical closeness is difficult for me." The clinical language was a shield. Physical closeness instead of intimacy. Difficult instead of impossible. She was keeping the truth at arm's length, even from herself. This is common in survivors of sexual trauma. They learn to speak about themselves in the third person to create separation between their identity and their physical form. The body becomes something that happened to them, not something they are. Has it always been difficult? A long pause stretched between us. The clock on my wall ticked softly. Outside, a car horn honked. The world continued. Oblivious. Clara looked at the window, not to escape this time, to find somewhere to put her eyes that wasn't on me. Always is a long time, Dr. Bennett. This response told me everything and nothing. She wasn't ready to go further. Not yet, so I waited. In this work, silence is often more powerful than questions. Clara needed to feel that this room had no demands, no expectations, no price. After nearly 2 minutes, she spoke again. Her voice had changed, smaller, younger, as if a child was speaking through her. I don't know where to start. There's no wrong place, I offered gently, and there's no rush. We have time. Clara's hands unfolded. For the first time I saw them tremble slightly, a fine vibration like a leaf in wind. Then she folded them again, tighter than before, the body wanting to release what the mind wasn't ready to let go. My mother died when I was 9. The sentence hung in the air like smoke. Not as a starting point, I realized, as a warning. She was telling me, everything that comes next flows from this moment. This is where the river of her pain begins. My father remarried a year later. Everyone said she was wonderful, the perfect stepmother. At first, I believed them. I wanted to believe them. Clara's jaw tightened. I could see the muscles working beneath her skin. My father was a long-haul truck driver, gone 4 or 5 days a week. When he was home, she was loving, attentive, made his favorite meals, laughed at his jokes the moment his truck disappeared down the road. She stopped mid-sentence. Her breathing changed, faster, shallower. The body was remembering before the words could form. I recognized this pattern immediately, the autonomic nervous system shifting into threat response. We were approaching something her body considered dangerous. Every cell in Clara's body was preparing to fight, flee, or freeze. Take your time, I murmured softly. You're safe here. This room has no expectations of you. Clara looked at me then, really looked. And in her eyes I saw something break open, the smallest crack in a wall she'd spent decades building, and no room has ever been safe for me, Dr. Bennett, not ever. In our third session, Clara arrived differently. The military posture was still there, but something underneath had shifted. Like a person who decided to walk into a fire, knowing it would burn. She didn't sit down immediately. Instead, she stood by the window, her back to me. I need to tell you something. If I look at you while I say it, I won't be able to say it. However, you need to do this, I replied, and then Clara told me about the guest room. Her voice was flat, monotone. This is what we call dissociative narration, when the story is so painful that the teller separates from their emotions to survive telling it. She spoke about herself like she was describing a character in someone else's tragedy. The first time, I was 11. I didn't understand what was happening. My stepmother told me to be nice to Uncle Robert. He wasn't my uncle. I'd never seen him before. She put me in my nicest dress, the one with the yellow flowers that my real mother had bought me. Brushed my hair until it shone, put a ribbon in it, put me in the guest room and closed the door. Clara's hand moved to the window frame, gripping it, her knuckles whitening. When he left, she gave me ice cream, strawberry, my favorite. You're a good girl, she kept saying. This is our secret. If you tell anyone, they'll take you away from Daddy. You'll be alone. I was already alone, but I didn't know it yet. The grooming pattern was textbook. Isolation. Normalization. Threats disguised as protection. Clara's stepmother had been methodical, calculated. This wasn't opportunistic abuse. This was systematic exploitation. How often did this happen? I asked, though part of me dreaded the answer. Clara turned partially from the window, just her profile visible now. Every time my father left, sometimes twice in one trip. Different men, always uncles. Uncle Robert, Uncle Michael, Uncle James. The teacher from the elementary school, the man who owned the hardware store, the man who led prayers at the church. Her voice caught a crack in the monotone. The man who led prayers at the church. He always smelled like communion wine and peppermint. He'd quote scripture while She couldn't finish. She didn't need to. I felt my professional composure slip, just for a moment. The religious leader added a particular layer of betrayal, the person meant to represent moral authority, safety, divine protection. Using a child, the psychological damage of that specific violation runs deep. It doesn't just destroy trust in people, it destroys trust in any concept of goodness. Clara, I began carefully, you mentioned earlier that your father knew. She turned from the window. Her face was dry, no tears. Survivors of prolonged abuse often can't cry about it. The tears were used up long ago. He didn't just know, Dr. Bennett. He participated, not directly. But he built the stage. He drove the truck that kept him away. He counted the money when he came home. He bought my stepmother jewelry with it. He built an addition on the house with it. She walked slowly to the chair and sat down. When she looked at me, her eyes were ancient, the eyes of someone who learned too young that monsters don't always look like monsters. The night I told him, the night I begged him, he wasn't surprised. He didn't ask questions. He didn't confront her. He just picked me up and put me back in that room, like returning a product to a shelf. Do you know what haunts me most? Clara asked. Her hands had stilled now, resting in her lap like dead things. It's not the men, it's not even my stepmother, it's that my father had a choice every single time. Every time he drove away in that truck, he was choosing. Every time he counted the money, he was choosing. He chose her. He chose money. He chose his own comfort over my survival. This insight was profound and devastating. Clara had already done significant psychological processing on her own. She understood that the deepest wound wasn't the abuse itself, it was the abandonment by the one person biologically programmed to protect her. What you're describing, I explained, is called betrayal trauma. It's often more damaging than the original violation because it attacks the foundation of attachment. The abuse told you the world was dangerous. Your father's complicity told you there was no one to turn to. No rescue coming. Clara nodded slowly. I stopped screaming after that night. What was the point? The one person who was supposed to hear me heard me. He just didn't care. In session 5, Clara told me about leaving. The autumn light had turned golden, streaming through my window in thick bars. She sat in shadow as she preferred, but her voice was stronger now. I was 14 when I got pregnant. She stated it simply, like reporting the weather, but her hands had moved to her stomach again. That unconscious gesture of grief for a body forever altered. I didn't even know what pregnancy was. Not really. We didn't have those conversations in my house. My real mother died before she could explain. My stepmother never bothered. I just knew something was wrong. I was sick every morning. My body was changing. Patricia noticed before I did. She looked at me one day while I was vomiting and her face went hard. You stupid girl, she hissed. Clara's voice wavered but steadied. She didn't take me to a doctor. She drove me 2 towns over at night to a woman named Janet who did things for cash. The house smelled like cats and cigarettes. Janet had yellow fingernails. She kept apologizing. I'm sorry, honey, I'm sorry. I understood what she wasn't saying. An unsafe procedure, no anesthesia, a child enduring an adult trauma on a kitchen table. I got an infection afterward, fever for days, shaking, delirious. Patricia gave me aspirin and told me to stop being dramatic. Other girls handle this fine, she kept saying. When I finally stopped bleeding, she told me to be more careful next time. More careful, like it was my fault, like a 14-year-old being sold to grown men should have been more careful. Clara's voice cracked, the first real emotion breaking through. There was so much damage, internal damage. When I got older, when I finally saw a real doctor, a kind woman who cried when she examined me, she said I could never. She couldn't finish. For the first time since I'd met her, tears fell. My husband wants children. He married me thinking we'd have a family. He sees babies in strollers and there's this longing in his eyes. He doesn't know that someone took that from me when I was 14, on a kitchen table, while my stepmother waited in the next room counting her money, complaining about the inconvenience. This is what we call compound trauma. It wasn't just the abuse, it wasn't just the pregnancy, it wasn't just the botched procedure, it was the permanent physical consequence, the theft of her future motherhood. And now it was the secret she carried in her marriage, each layer pressing down on the one below. I ran away at 16. Clara continued, wiping her cheeks with the back of her hand, a child's gesture. I thought I was finally free. I remember the morning I left. October. The leaves were turning. I packed everything I owned into a garbage bag and walked out the back door at 4 in the morning. The grass was wet with dew. I walked 12 miles to the bus station and bought a ticket to anywhere. The way she emphasized thought told me everything, the bitterness wrapped around the word. I lived on the streets for almost 2 years, shelters when I could get in, doorways when I couldn't, under bridges during the worst nights, listening to cars rumble overhead. Do you know what happens to a 16-year-old girl alone on the streets, Dr. Bennett? I nodded. I did know, the horrific irony of escaping one form of exploitation only to encounter another, out of the frying pan into the fire. Different address, same predators. Different faces, same room, same hands, same lies. I'll take care of you. You can trust me. I just want to help. I started to think maybe this was just what I was for. My purpose. Maybe my stepmother was right. This was the only value I had. My body was currency, and I was going to spend it one way or another. This is the insidious legacy of child sexual exploitation. It doesn't just damage, it defines. It teaches victims that their worth is measured in what can be taken from their bodies. Clara had internalized this lesson so deeply that even escape led her back to the same dynamic. The geography changed, the economy stayed the same. A teacher found me at a bus station in Cleveland, Mr. William Garrett. I was sitting on a bench, hollow-eyed, hadn't eaten in 3 days. He sat down next to me, didn't crowd me. He bought me a sandwich and watched me eat it. He had kind eyes, gray at his temples. "You look like you could use some help," he said. "I have a spare room." Sat no strings attached. Clara's expression darkened, a shadow passing over her features. For a month he was kind, fatherly even. He helped me get my strength back, fed me real food, pot roast, vegetables, let me sleep in a real bed with clean sheets, gave me clothes that fit. He helped me get a library card. We watched documentaries together. I started to trust him. I thought, finally, someone good, someone who sees me as a person. She laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. Then one night, he knocked on my door. It was late. I was almost asleep. He came in and sat on the edge of my bed. "You've been here a month," he said. His voice was different, harder. "Nothing in life is free. It's time to pay rent." I felt anger rise in my chest. Every adult who should have protected Clara had betrayed her. Her father, her stepmother, the community leaders, the teacher who found her. A chain of failures wrapped around a child's neck, link after link. "I stayed with him for another year," Clara murmured. "Where else was I going to go? Back to the streets? Back to the random men with their random needs? At least with William it was just one person. At least I knew what to expect. At least there was a roof and food." The calculus of survival. When all options are terrible, you choose the least terrible. Clara had learned to measure abuse in degrees, to rank predators by severity, a skill no child should ever need. When I was 19, something changed. Clara's voice shifted. Still guarded, but with something else underneath, something fragile and precious, a seed of light in all that darkness. The teacher kicked me out, found someone younger, a new girl at the bus station probably, same playbook. I ended up at a women's shelter. A gray building downtown with bars on the windows and a security guard at the door. I expected more of the same, another version of the guest room. Another price to pay for safety. She paused. When she continued, her voice was softer, almost wondering. "There was a woman there, I don't remember her name. Isn't that strange? The most important person in my life and I don't remember her name. I've tried. Margaret, Martha? She was just a volunteer, came in twice a week. Gray hair in a loose bun. Bifocals she kept pushing up. A cardigan with a coffee stain on the sleeve. Probably 60 years old. When I arrived, I was filthy, hadn't showered in a week, sick with bronchitis, terrified. She didn't ask any questions, she didn't fill out forms, she just walked up to me and hugged me." Clara's eyes glistened. I stood there frozen. I didn't know what to do with my arms. People didn't touch me like that. But without wanting something, not without a price. I kept waiting for her to let go and tell me what she needed, but she just held me. I could smell lavender soap and coffee. Her heartbeat was slow and steady against my cheek, and she whispered, "You're safe here. No one will hurt you here. You don't owe us anything." Her voice broke. I cried for 3 hours. I couldn't stop. 8 years of tears, All the tears I'd been saving, locking away. That woman sat with me the whole time, on a plastic chair in a fluorescent-lit lobby. She didn't try to fix me or explain anything, she just stayed. This is what we call a corrective emotional experience. For the first time in Clara's conscious memory, someone offered comfort without conditions. It wasn't the hug that changed her. Hugs had been weapons before. It was the absence of expectation. The revolutionary concept that kindness could exist without a price tag, that she could receive without owing, that her presence alone was enough. That shelter saved my life, Clara continued. They helped me get my GED, helped me apply to community college, found me scholarships. I became a veterinarian because she smiled. The first real smile I'd seen from her. Animals don't lie, they don't manipulate, they don't pretend to love you while planning to hurt you. When a dog looks at you, what you see is what you get. Her career choice made perfect sense. After a lifetime of human betrayal, Clara found safety in creatures incapable of deception. It was both a coping mechanism and a form of healing. But that's not the end of the story, is it? I asked gently. Clara shook her head, her jaw tightened. My father found me when I was 28. He called my veterinary clinic, said he was dying, said he needed to see me before he went. Her hands had started shaking again. Part of me wanted to hang up, part of me wanted to scream, but part of me still wanted my daddy. Still wanted to hear him say he was sorry, that he loved me, that he wished he'd protected me. This is the cruel paradox of parental abuse. The child's need for parental love doesn't disappear when the parent is the abuser. It goes underground, it festers, and it can pull survivors back into harmful relationships because that unmet need remains so powerful. I went to see him. He was in hospice, liver failure, all those years of drinking. He looked so small in that bed, so weak. Clara's voice had gone cold. I sat by his bed, he reached for my hand, and I let him hold it. I don't know why. Maybe I still hoped. He cried, Clara recounted. I thought he was going to apologize. Finally. After 17 years, I thought this is it, this is where I get my closure. I watched Clara carefully, her face had become a mask. He gripped my hand tighter. I need you to know something, he wheezed, so I can die in peace. Clara let out a breath that was almost a laugh. Almost a scream. He didn't apologize, he confessed. Like I was a priest, like I could absolve him. She looked at me directly. He told me he knew about everything from the very beginning. He told me it was his idea, not my stepmother's, his. He needed money for his gambling debts. She had the connections, they were partners. Even knowing Clara's story, this revelation hit me physically. Her own father, the architect of her destruction. But that wasn't the worst part, Clara continued. The worst part was what he said next. She closed her eyes. He said, "We saved the money, all of it, for your stepsisters, for their education, for their futures. You gave them that, Clara. You should be proud." I felt sick. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was asking for gratitude. He'd reframed her torture as a gift. "What did you say?" I asked. "Nothing." I walked out. He died 2 days later. I didn't go to the funeral. I didn't cry. Clara opened her eyes. They were dry, blazing. In his will there was one line for me. "To my daughter Clara, I leave my apologies for what couldn't be helped." Couldn't be helped. As if the systematic sale of his daughter was a natural disaster. The language of abdication dressed up as an apology. My stepsisters found me on Facebook a few months ago. Clara's voice had gone flat again. Protective numbness. They wanted to reconnect. Said they'd always wondered about me. Their mother told them I'd been troubled. Difficult, that I'd run away and broken their father's heart. She shook her head slowly. One of them messaged me, "We'd love to meet you. Mom still talks about you. She says she tried so hard with you, but you were just so angry all the time." The gaslighting continued even now. The stepmother had constructed an alternate narrative where she was the saint and Clara was the problem child. The stepsisters had grown up with a fiction that erased their sister's suffering entirely. "Did you respond?" I asked. I typed something, deleted it, typed again. What could I say? "Your education was paid for with my body. Your mother sold me to fund your dance lessons." Clara's hands were fists now. They don't know. They'll probably never know. And if I told them, they wouldn't believe me. Why would they? Their mother is a saint. She volunteers at the church now. Does charity work. got an award last year for community service. This is perhaps the most painful aspect of Clara's story, the complete absence of justice. Her abusers aren't in prison. They're not shunned. Her stepmother is celebrated. The men who assaulted her are respected community members. In our 8th session, Clara arrived agitated, barely contained. I went back, she announced before she even sat down. To the town, to her house. My heart rate increased. Confrontations with abusers can be re-traumatizing or liberating, sometimes both. What happened? Clara paced the room. She opened the door. She's 62 now. Gray hair, grandma glasses. She smiled at me. Clara, oh my goodness, look at you. Come in, come in. Clara stopped pacing, her whole body rigid. She acted like nothing had happened. She offered me tea, TA, in the same kitchen where she counted money after each time. Did you confront her? I tried. I described it, all of it, the room, the men, the money, and she just blinked at me. I think you've confused me with someone else, dear. Or maybe you had bad dreams as a child. You always had such vivid nightmares. This is textbook denial. Whether genuine delusion or calculated gaslighting, the effect is the same. Clara was being told her reality wasn't real. I left, Clara murmured quietly. I drove to a parking lot and screamed until my throat bled. Then I hurt myself for the first time in 10 years. She showed me her forearm. Fresh scars, still pink. I needed to feel something real, because she made me feel crazy, like maybe I did imagine it all. You didn't imagine it, I declared firmly. Your body remembers, your nervous system remembers. The damage is real. You are not crazy. Clara looked at me, tears finally falling. Then why does everyone act like it didn't happen? The following weeks were difficult. Clara wrestled with a profound existential crisis. If no one else acknowledges your trauma, does it still exist? Can you heal from wounds the world refuses to see? In session 12, she brought something. A faded notebook, the kind school children use. I found this. She placed it on my desk. When my father died, I got a few boxes of his things. I never opened them. Last week I finally did. Her hands trembled as she opened the notebook. It's a ledger, in her handwriting. Dates, names, amounts. I looked at the page Clara showed me. Neat columns, careful penmanship. It was a business ledger, for the systematic sale of a child. Proof, Clara whispered. I'm not crazy. It's all here. 5 years of transactions. My name isn't in it. She just used product, but the dates match. It's real. She looked up at me. What do you want to do with this? I asked carefully. The statute of limitations has passed. She'll never go to prison. What justice is there? She looked up at me, fierce. But this exists. I exist. What happened to me is real, and now I have proof that nobody can deny. Clara's husband Michael came to a session. She'd asked him to. It took her 3 weeks to work up the courage. He was what you'd expect from someone Clara would choose. Gentle, patient, confused, broad shoulders but soft eyes. The kind of man who opens doors for strangers. 8 years of marriage, and he'd never understood why his wife flinched at his touch. Why she sometimes looked through him, like he wasn't there. Why she insisted on sleeping with the light on. Why she checked the locks 3 times. He'd loved her through all of it without understanding any of it. Michael was nervous. His leg bounced. He kept looking at Clara, trying to read her face. He'd been terrified for this meeting, terrified of what he might learn. Terrified that whatever she told him would end their marriage. Clara wanted to tell you something, I began. Something important, something that will be hard to hear. I'm here to support both of you through this conversation. Clara's hands were shaking badly. Michael reached for them instinctively, without thinking. The way you reach for someone you love when they're hurting. She let him hold them. A small victory. A bridge across the chasm. What followed was the hardest thing Clara had ever done. Harder than surviving the abuse. Harder than escaping. Harder than confronting her stepmother. Because this time she had something to lose. She had love, real love, the first real love she'd ever known. And she was about to risk it all. She told Michael everything. The guest room, the men, her stepmother Patricia, her father's complicity, the streets, the teacher William, the shelter, the pregnancy at 14, the procedure, Janet shaking hands, the infection, the scars inside that meant she could never give him children. It took over an hour. She had to stop multiple times, had to breathe, had to be reminded she was safe. Michael didn't let go of her hands, not once. Tears streamed down his face, this big gentleman weeping openly. But he didn't let go. When she finished, silence filled the room. Heavy. Pregnant. The afternoon light had shifted, shadows had moved. I didn't know, he whispered finally. His voice thick, cracked. All these years, I thought you didn't love me enough. I thought you were pulling away. I thought I wasn't enough for you. I stayed up nights wondering what I was doing wrong. I never knew you were just trying to survive. Every single day, every time I touched you, just trying to survive. Clara broke down then, really broke down. The wall she'd built over decades crumbled in that moment. I wanted to tell you. Every day I wanted to tell you. Every time you looked at babies and strollers, but I was so scared you'd leave. You'd think I was dirty, damaged, used goods. Michael pulled her close. You're not damaged, you're not dirty, you're the strongest person I've ever known. I just didn't understand why. Now I do, and I'm not going anywhere. He looked at me over her shoulder. What do I do? How do I help her? Tell me what to do. You're already doing it, I responded. You're staying. You're listening. You're not running. You're not making this about you. That's more than anyone has ever given her. 3 months after that session, Clara told me something that made me believe in the possibility of healing. Michael held me last night, in bed, just held me, and I didn't flinch. Her eyes were wet but bright, for the first time in 8 years. I didn't flinch, I didn't freeze, I didn't go somewhere else in my head. I stayed, I felt his arms around me, and I felt safe. This might sound small to someone who hasn't lived with trauma, but for Clara, this was enormous. Years of her body betraying her, years of being unable to accept love without terror, and now a moment of peace. I cried afterward, she admitted, not from sadness, from realization. I realized what I'd been missing. All these years I was alive but not living, married but alone. I had someone who loved me, and I couldn't feel it. And now I'm learning, one moment at a time. 6 months into our work together, Clara did something unexpected. She wrote a letter, not to her stepmother, not to her father's grave, to herself, to the 11-year-old girl in the yellow flower dress. She read it to me in session, her voice steady at first, then breaking, then steady again. Dear Clara, I know you're scared right now. I know you don't understand what's happening to you. I know you think it's your fault. I know you think you're dirty and broken and worthless. I know you think no one will ever love you. I'm writing to tell you that you survived this. You survive all of it. The room, the men, the streets, the silence. You survive, and one day a man will love you. Really love you. He'll hold your hand through the darkest story you've ever told, and he won't let go. He'll choose you. Every single day he'll choose you, and one day you'll become a mother, not the way you expected. But you'll hold a child in your arms, and you'll promise them what no one ever promised you. I will protect you. I will believe you. You are safe with me. The people who hurt you won't face justice. I'm sorry, I wish I could tell you different. But you'll find a different kind of justice. The kind you build with your own 2 hands, the kind that lives in the family you create. You're going to be okay, not today, not tomorrow, but eventually. Hold on. Love, Clara. When she finished reading, neither of us spoke for a long time. The afternoon light had shifted, the shadows had grown longer, and somewhere in that silence, something healed, not completely, not permanently, but enough to keep going. Clara still comes to see me. Healing from this kind of trauma isn't a destination. It's a journey without a clear end point. There's no finish line where you're declared healed and sent on your way. There are good days and bad days. There are setbacks and breakthroughs. There are moments of profound despair and moments of unexpected joy. Last month, she made a decision that moved me deeply. We're starting the adoption process, she told me, her face alight in a way I'd never seen. A new light, a hopeful light. Michael and I, we submitted our application. We're going to become parents. I felt tears prick my eyes. Unprofessional, perhaps, but deeply human. Sometimes this work breaks your heart in all the right ways. I used to think I couldn't be a mother because of what was taken from me, that the guest room had stolen that possibility forever. But now I understand, being a mother isn't about biology. It's not about pregnancy or giving birth. It's about choosing to love and protect a child. It's about being everything my parents weren't. It's about breaking the cycle instead of continuing it. She smiled. A real smile. radiant. There's a kid out there somewhere who needs someone. Someone to keep them safe. Someone to tell them their body belongs to them and no one else. Someone to believe them if they say something bad happened. Someone who will never, ever put them in a guest room. I want to be that person. I need to be that person. This is what healing can look like, not the erasure of trauma. That's not possible. The scars remain, the memories remain, but transformation is possible. Clara was taking the worst thing that ever happened to her and alchemizing it into love, into protection, into fierce, determined care for a child who needed it. The cycle stops with me, Clara declared, her voice strong and clear. My father chose to sell me, my stepmother chose to profit. I choose something different. I choose to protect. I choose to believe. I choose to love without conditions. I choose to be the parent I needed and never had. That's my justice. That's my victory. Clara's stepmother Patricia is still alive, still respected in her community, still volunteering at the church, still receiving awards for her charitable work with at-risk youth. The irony of that still makes my stomach turn. The men who abused Clara are still out there. Some have died of old age, surrounded by loving families who never knew. Some are still alive, still coaching Little League, still serving on church boards, still posting family photos online. There will be no arrest, no trial, no mugshot, no public accounting for what was done to that little girl in the guest room. The ledger sits in Clara's safe, proof of crimes that will never be prosecuted. The statute of limitations ran out years ago. The world has moved on, oblivious to the suffering it enabled. But justice isn't always found in courtrooms. It isn't always delivered by judges in black robes. Sometimes justice is a survivor learning to feel safe in her husband's arms. Sometimes it's a woman who was told she was worthless deciding to become a mother anyway. Sometimes it's breaking a cycle of abuse that might have continued for generations. Sometimes it's standing in the light and refusing to be ashamed of wounds you didn't choose. Clara will never get an apology. She'll never hear her stepmother admit what happened. She'll never see the men who hurt her face punishment. She'll never have the closure that movies promise, but she is alive. She is alive. She is healing. She is loved by a man who knows her whole truth and chooses her anyway. And soon there will be a child in this world who knows they are precious, who knows their body is their own, who knows that when they speak, they will be believed, who will never have to learn their price. That is Clara's victory. That is her justice. That is her revenge against everyone who tried to destroy her. The guest room no longer has power over her. She has taken that power back, and she's using it to build something beautiful from the rubble of her past. I hope this story has helped you see your own life, your own emotions, or the people around you from a different perspective. I hope it has helped you understand yourself and others a little better. I would love to hear something about you in the comments, to know you and your story a little better. If you want to share what's inside you, you can write to the email address in my profile. And if this story touched you, don't forget to like and subscribe to be notified about the next real-life story. You can turn on notifications by clicking the bell icon. Before we end, I want to ask you a few questions. Take a moment to think about them. What do you think about this story? Does Clara's journey remind you of anything in your own life or in the lives of people you know? Can wounds this deep truly heal? Or do we just learn to live with the scars? What does healing even mean when someone has suffered this much? How do you feel about Clara's stepmother living out her days as a respected community member? Does it change anything that she'll never face justice? What would you say to the 11-year-old Clara if you could go back in time? And what would you say to the 34-year-old Clara who walked into my office that first day? Clara chose to adopt a child instead of letting her trauma define her future. Do you believe we can transform our pain into something meaningful? Have you ever seen someone do this in your own life? If you could send a message to Clara right now, what would you want her to know? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. Your perspective matters. Your voice matters.